What's going on, everybody? It's my show with Scott Kosek. I am, of course, Scott Kosek. Today is Monday, August 17th, 2026. I would like to say, first and foremost, happy anniversary, happy one-year anniversary to my youngest son and his beautiful wife. I would also like to say happy 28th birthday to my oldest son. Turns that tomorrow. I would like to say happy third birthday to my youngest grandson, who turns 3 on Friday. And last but not least, I would like to say happy birthday to yours truly. Are you supposed to say happy birthday to yourself? I don't think that that's a thing. But yeah, a week from today is my 51st birthday. You know, I don't know if you remember last year, me celebrating the 50th, you know, had a sign over there that said, Scott is 50. I can't believe it's been a year already, but, you know, listen, every year is just a smidge shorter than the year before. I was just talking about that earlier this week at, actually last week at the Big Red preview game. One of the boosters was saying, hey, what do you know, Scott? And I said, I know that these years just get a little bit shorter and a little bit shorter every single year. Like, I can't believe that we're already, like, this is go back to school week already. Like, these guys are going back to school this week. High school football starts this week. But yeah, anyway, so all right, guys. So I got a bit of a show for you tonight. Obviously, I'm sitting in the as serious as I can be chair. Actually, that's not entirely true. If you know me, you know I can get pretty serious. I like, over there on my table, I have a stuffed Eeyore because, you know, I could definitely get pretty serious at times. But at any rate, welcome to the show. So yeah, like about a little over a year ago, I started this. I started sitting down, trying to unpack what makes my brain tick, what kind of stuff I got going on inside my head. And this is episode 19, and I've been dangling in your face for the better part of 18 episodes that at some point in time I was going to talk about data centers. And you're like, let's get with it, Scott. You've been talking about data centers without talking about data centers for a very long time. Well, you are in luck. Tonight is finally the night. So a couple episodes back, I kind of took a break from things for a minute. I was considering changing the name and the format of the show. I don't have the time, nor am I tech savvy enough to really kind of sit and learn how to do these things better. So I've just decided that I'm just going to keep this pretty much how we've been rolling. But one of the things that I decided when I came back from my break, I'll call it, is that episode 19 was going to be the one for data centers. And the reason why is because a couple of different people that I listen to in talk, YouTube type world, social media, real type people or whatever, many of them, several of them, including a couple of different ones that were somewhat more prominent, they, for COVID-19, really thought that the 19 stood for AI. And, you know, if you go through the letters of the alphabet and you have A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, you have A, 1, I, 9, right? So COVID-19 was this idea of like something that was being implemented for a rollout of artificial intelligence. And I'll tell you that doing my due diligence to try to research this stuff, so where it's not just me talking about junk off the top of my head, there's some real prominence to AI, not necessarily finding its birthplace in the whole COVID thing, but definitely a push towards it being something that is being used in readily available for everybody everywhere all the time. So why AI? Right. Well, if you've been watching me for any length of time, you know that I am certainly somebody who likes to take strolls down memory lane. I'm definitely a nostalgic kind of guy. I could tell you all about 1985 and beyond. We're definitely not going to get into that tonight. But I would like to take a stroll back to nobody's favorite year of 2020. Remember 2020? Boy, that was the life. You could plenty of good parking everywhere that you went. Streets were not crowded. You didn't have to fight rush hour traffic. You could sit around in your pajamas all day. Didn't have to go to work. Listen, I have like I said, I got a stuffed Eeyore over there. Give me some credit that I'm sitting here trying to pull some silver lining out of the misery of 2020. Me and my wife, we did not participate in that whole spiel. Is as much as we could not, as much as we were able to not participate in that whole nonsense, we definitely did not. I did, for full confession's sake, full disclosure, I definitely wore a mask once. That was the one and only time that I had a mask on my face. I was in between doctors and I had to find a new doctor. And the stipulation of this doctor that I went to one time was that I needed to have a mask on. And the immediate result of me having a mask on was that I had like this sky high blood pressure. It was like 200 over like 105 or something. It was like stroke out blood pressure. And I was like, this is really dumb. I'm never going to do this again. And so I didn't. I decided right then and there that I was done with doing the mask. I wasn't going to play that stupid game. I already wasn't trying to play that stupid game before that, but the whole idea that I had to go to the doctor and that was the stipulation of going to the doctor, then whatever. And so after that, I just figured out how to get by without it, or do my due diligence to let whomever know ahead of time that I'm coming, but I'm not masking. I definitely was not going the right way down the grocery aisles. It was COVID directional. I don't know. I get what it was all about. It was trying to make you not be face to face with somebody that wasn't in your immediate group of people that you were typically around. But I also don't get it because it's just absolutely stupid. One of the things that I remember taking place when, like I said, me and my wife, we weren't participating. We were still leaving, going, doing things, going to the grocery store, taking rides. Just we were trying our best to live our life exactly how it was prior to the best that we could. And one of the things that we noticed when we were driving around out and about through town was we noticed Xfinity trucks all along the streets. And I don't mean like some big convoy of Xfinity trucks. I mean, we just saw that there would be like several trucks in some particular part of town. And we would notice, like driving back through that same part of town the next day, that those trucks weren't very far down the road. And so there was clearly something taking place at that time that at the time we didn't really know what it was. Well, in the midst of looking into things to try to talk about AI and data centers and things, I came across this idea of Secure 5G and Beyond Act of 2020. So this was an act that was signed into law at the end of March of 2020. And, just at face value, that sounds like it's something that lines up and tracks with what was taking place in the world at that time. The world had gotten crazy. Things had been closed down. They basically kicked all the kids out of school. So end of March of 2020, sure, that tracks. That sounds like a real thing. And basically what this thing was that it was pushed forward as a thing to try to keep foreign entities out of the implementation of 5G in the country. And what it eventually got changed into was like this like fast tracking of implementing 5G across the nation. And so one of the things that, again, looking back through COVID-19 and different things that went on during that time and even stuff before that time, I could definitely go down a rabbit hole of a lot of things really didn't make sense. And there were a lot of different things that were put in place before and during that really kind of made you scratch your head. Like, for instance, anybody else remember them putting up the gates at Walmart that you had to, like, you coming in would make the gates open, but then you would have to like go through a checkout to be able to leave? Those gates were definitely there before COVID, which is really strange. Like, how did y'all know that was something that was going to be needed? But I digress. Something else that came online like in the year leading up to COVID, and I mean, I'm talking about like like the start of that school year, something that started rolling out everywhere, at least locally. I'm sure other places maybe had it a little bit ahead of time than that, was the whole curbside pickup, which I also find really weird and interesting timing for you to roll out this thing right before a time when nobody's going to be comfortable going to the grocery store and walking up and down the one-way only aisles to be able to get their stuff. But again, maybe you were just already figuring that was something that was coming along, and whatever. Tip my hat to you. Good business planning and strategy on your part. But this Secure 5G and Beyond Act of 2020, this was originally put together in March of 2019, like an entire year before anything. Like, listen, if you would have told me that this thing was very first put together towards the end of 2019, I would say, great, that has validity. As far as, so let me back up a minute. Why was there this big rollout of this 5G implementation? Well, again, do you remember 2020? Do you remember how everybody was forced to stay home? And all of a sudden, everybody's streaming all the different streaming apps. Everybody's now telecommuting. Everybody's on their computer. The whole thought process behind everything is that the demand on the network was so high that you really didn't have a choice but to implement this stuff. But that's not true either, because people staying at home and putting this kind of a demand on the network had not really started yet in the time that they were actually voting on this. So like the Senate voted on it and then the House voted on it. I don't know which one did which first. I might have it up on my screen here somewhere. Yeah, here we go. So March 4th, 2020, the Senate debated and passed the amended bill by unanimous consent. March 11th, the House of Representatives passed the bill without objection. March 23rd, Donald Trump signed the legislation finalizing a 362-day timeline from its formal introduction to becoming public law. Now, why do I even point any of this stuff out? Well, prior to 5G, the way that cell phone stuff worked, the way that cell phone towers worked, the way that all that stuff was going on, was that it was really just like a signal going to these towers that were very far apart from one another, many times being like miles apart from one another. And so about the best you could do with that would be to get into like a specific part of a neighborhood as far as being able to track like where a call came from or whatever. And so, if you were say that was something that they were able to triangulate somewhere in the vicinity of my house, that would be within enough of a range that they wouldn't know if it was my house, the neighbor's house, the neighbor on the other side, or whatever, because the cell phone towers were just so far away, because 4G worked on a wavelength that was a much wider, much broader wavelength. It could travel those distances and the signal wouldn't be degraded to the point where it wouldn't be usable, I guess is the best way to say that. 5G doesn't work that way. 5G is a much shorter wavelength. And so what needs to happen in order for 5G to work is that 5G signal needs to go, like it can only travel a short distance. It needs to be picked up by something within that short distance to be able to make it do what it has to do. And so what were all these Xfinity trucks doing as we were driving around during COVID-19? They're installing 5G everywhere. And I don't know if you recall going through town and seeing this go on, but that's basically what was going on. And the reason behind this is because the way that the 5G signal works, it can bounce off of different things real easy and lose its signal based off of buildings, concrete, trees, whatever. So they needed this to be virtually on every single telephone pole within an area for this to do anything. This, like I say, this is not the birthplace of AI, but this is somewhere where AI goes from arguably like an infancy to like full-blown adulthood. And what do I mean by that? Well, what they needed to do with this. So not only do you have cell phone like calls and texts, being handed off from 5G transmitter to 5G transmitter to 5G transmitter so that it could go wherever it needs to go, it had a lot more pinpoint accuracy of where you were at. It was no longer going to be something that would have it be triangulated to my neighborhood. It could literally have me triangulated to like this corner of this room in my house. And along with that came all of these unintended consequences of a whole bunch of different things. And I'm going to try to do my best to get into it here with that. But before I do that, I'd like to talk a little bit more about some of the unintended consequences of COVID-19 as it pertains to like business and whatnot. So like the side effects of COVID business strategies. You know, you've heard me talk and rant and rave about how ridiculous it is to go to some place like Wendy's these days, right? I remember prior to COVID, Wendy's was a place. Wintersville Wendy's had Rita. We definitely all certainly miss you, Rita. But within that time, there were an awful lot more people that worked in there. And the only way for anything to get rang up was through the lady at the register. There weren't all these different other means to get orders placed at the Wintersville Wendy's. And so the lady behind the counter, Rita, in most cases, depending on what time you went there, was more or less like the arbiter of the orders. And you couldn't get an order in there unless she was manually putting it into the register. She was able to then look down the line to see how busy everybody was on putting stuff together. She would take it upon herself to do her due diligence to either decide to ring up another order or go down to try to help put orders together on a tray. You definitely had more people behind the counter helping her do that, but it was a much more controlled process. Whereas today, going in Wendy's, it's absolutely mayhem. First of all, the people behind the counter, they're generally unhappy. They are way more frustrated than you are as the consumer because they know the system is broke, but it affects them all day long, where it only affects you for like the 10 or 15 minutes that you got to be in there trying to get your lunch on the fly. But this is what I mean by like the unintended consequences of COVID business strategies. So like, they learned real quick during that time, we don't want you here. Like, we want you to buy our food and we want you to take and eat our food, but we don't want you here for a whole host of reasons. Number one, if you're leaving here, it's going to lower the occurrence of you complaining about things being wrong. Because let's face it, we're all busy. We all go about our lives, do our daily stuff, and a lot of times it's not worth the extra half hour that you need to put in it to call and say, you know what, I hate pickles. I told you no pickles. You gave me pickles anyway. You guys don't have any clue how to do what you're supposed to do. A lot of times anymore, you'll just be like, you know what, I can easily grab these pickles and flick them in the garbage and it's all good. Right. So one of the unintended consequences of them getting to try this out the way that it was is less incidents by you physically not being there to eat. Number two, we don't have to have this extra crew of people to go and clean up after you because you've gotten used to not sitting down within the restaurant and eating. But the big thing, which really frustrates me to no end, is that there are like 17 ways for somebody to order. And so while you're standing in line at Wendy's, right, waiting to order, which I don't do anymore, I get on the app and I order on the app. I highly recommend you do the same thing. It's going to save you time. It's going to save a lot of people a lot of headache and heartache. Just do it on the app. And I'm somebody that's like not very like tech savvy or tech forward, and I do that with all the different places that have it available. Probably shouldn't be eating Wendy's though. Just put that out there. But yeah, so if you're standing in line and you got one or two people ahead of you, watch the little ticket printer. You'll see tickets print up. And it wasn't because somebody at the register did something. It's because somebody else on the app ordered something or somebody on DoorDash ordered something. And that jumped you in line rather than you being the next person because you're clearly the next person in line. That's not how things work these days. And that also is a direct result of the business strategies that came about as a result of COVID. Well, one of the other things that happened as a result of COVID, especially with this whole influx of 5G, they figured out that with this Internet of Things that was also culminating around the same time, everything talks. It's not just your computer and your phone anymore. Everything talks. People have wearable devices they're in a vehicle. That vehicle has all kind of different sensors and monitors. It knows if you have a passenger in the passenger seat. So yeah, man, you have all these different things that talk and communicate. You have smart TVs, you have smart watches, you have smartphones, you have smart ovens, you have smart washers and dryers. You can throw that casserole in there in the morning when you leave to go to work, and you can program it to turn on at 2:30 so that it's cooking for 2.5 hours just in time for you to get home shortly after 5. Boom, right? All this stuff provides data. And so like even like your phone, it's not just a phone, it's a tracking device. It has GPS built into it. It knows when you're walking, it knows when you're talking. And like you have those health apps on your thing to show, how many steps you had today, how many flights of elevation you took, that sort of thing. That's all data. And what they didn't what was kind of an unintended consequence of implementing 5G was understanding that you now have real-time access to everything that everybody is doing all the time. You know where they're at, you know where they're stopped, you know when they go, you know the people that they hang out with. You can cross-reference that with things like your social media, the different friends that you have, the people that comment on your stuff. Even like the algorithms of, what to show you in your feed, whose stories you actually click on and interact with, whose people you ignore. That's why you don't see, like, I've lost count. I've got well over 1,000 Facebook friends. I definitely do not have 1,000 friends, just so you know. But I have like over 1,000 Facebook friends. What's funny is like, I will try my best to make sure that I know people so that if I see them out, I'll say hello to them. And it's funny, some of the reaction that you get from people because you're a Facebook friend, which you're not really my friend. You're just a Facebook friend. Like people won't even know you or be able to like respond to you when you say hi to them out someplace because we've just lost all touch with like human interaction, human kindness. At any rate, there's just this infinite amount of data, just data everywhere. And you certainly can't put this to like, you need to find a good use for this data. So this is where we get the influx of data centers, because basically where data centers kind of started, I mean, there's always been like some type of data storage of sorts for different things for as long back as you could go computer and internet wise. But as far as like what this was producing, this then leads to the idea of edge data centers. And where that word edge comes from is basically that you're going to have this on the edge of some group of people, some populous area, and you're extracting all of that information that is being passed along all those 5G towers so that you have somewhere to collect all this and make some use out of it. And what you're able to do with this data is to start to train the AI. See, AI used to be something that would exist primarily in some school science wing somewhere. And in order to train it, you have to give it data. You have to give it data points. You have to get, for all of my old heads out there that are like 50 plus, do you remember watching Short Circuit, the movie with Steve Guttenberg, who, by the way, is also another August 24th dude? There's the robot. And I can't remember what happens to the robot, but the robot comes alive. It becomes sentient, right? Johnny Five. Well, Johnny Five's running around talking about need input. And that's basically what we're getting at with this. Like AI, in order for it to learn and understand and get a better idea for humanity and why we make the decisions that we make, or why we stop at the end of an aisle somewhere and just stop and gaze at whatever product is on the corner there, rather than other aisles we go down, we don't even ask questions, we grab that bag of chips, we grab that box of raisins or whatever, and we don't even bat an eye about it. now you have an opportunity to know when and where and why and how somebody is doing all this different stuff. You have all these different things to cross-reference. You have your shopper's card at a lot of the different stores. This is also data sets, so they can sit there and put together what you bought versus the things that you stood and looked at and try to get an idea of, this thing isn't on his receipt. Why didn't he buy that? He stood there and looked at that for 45 seconds when it took him like less than 0.5 seconds to grab that bag of salt and vinegar chips. So unintended consequences of all this. One of the other things that I want to point out about this whole implementation of 5G is the timing of it all. And it's really interesting that this took place during the whole lockdown time, because if you've been paying attention to things going on in our country right now, you know that like data centers are like, it's like the only game in town. Like, you don't have any places coming knocking down our door to come open up a new steel mill or, figure out new ways of creating something, some new product, some new technology. Like, this is it. Like, all chips are on data centers and AI. And what's interesting about that is that as you're watching this unfold, if you're paying attention, if you're somebody like me and you're plugged into the right algorithm to even have an opportunity to pay attention because it's not being reported on your nightly news, you're seeing that there's different people, different places that are pushing back against this stuff. And it is kind of slowing down the process. They didn't have that during COVID-19 because everything was closed and nobody was doing anything. And so this whole like cool off period that they had to like give the public an opportunity to say their piece and, stand up and give your 2 cents on if you think this is a good idea or don't think, that did not happen with 5G, like at all. And that's why they were able to like push this bill through. This bill comes through almost immediately after things are shut down. You go through town, you see them putting these things up on all the different telephone poles and that sort of thing. Artificial intelligence is restricting the things that you see. And I don't mean that it's like necessarily blacklisting different things, but based off of the things that you already choose to watch, it's then giving you more of the same stuff to watch. So like, if you didn't know it's a problem, then you're never going to know that it's a problem, because only if you're researching this already and watching things about this would you ever even know that any of this stuff is even a problem. I was reading somewhere that was basically saying that the whole 5G rollout, if it were to have gone through the types of hoops that it would normally have to jump through, that it would have taken at least a decade for 5G to roll out, and instead it rolled out in months. And this is because of, like I say, going through this at a time when everything's locked down, everybody's paying attention to something else, not paying attention to that. Oh yeah, that reminds me, do you know something else that was going on during that time that has some bearing on all this? Do you remember the idea of contact tracing? Like, they were really using your cell phone data and information and history to know like who you were around and when, and were able to then use that against other data that they were compiling in medical stuff to figure out like, oh, we have this bunch of people over here that seem to be testing positive for this thing. They were using the information that was the data being handed down from your phone to know where you were and who you were around. Listen, that stuff didn't just go away. Like, it was something that they certainly found great use for then. Do you think that they're not doing that and some with the stuff? Anyway, just another little thing that I was thinking about trying to go back through all that. But yeah, so train the AI, that's what you basically got out of 5G. That's what was moving forward from then till now. Data centers of then, you could really just air condition the building and try to pull that air through and discharge it on the other side of the building. These things work at a super high, enormous rate versus that, to where you no longer have the ability to cool this down using air conditioning. this stuff is all liquid cooled. And so the idea of a closed loop system is something that has been talked about by different people. But even within that, there is that has to be basically extracted and replaced from time to time in order to keep it doing whatever. So you have even the environmental impact of used water. I'm not getting into any of that. You can make a case for any and all of that. But I want to talk about, how is AI used? There are a lot of different things that AI is used for, but for the most part, as it comes to you and me, we could break it down into for business and for consumers, right? So within the use of AI for business, business uses AI to turn massive unorganized consumer data points into actionable insights through several mechanisms. One of those is predictive surveillance. This tracks your browsing habits, your location data, your purchase history. It wants to know ahead of time basically what you're going to buy before you even know that you're going to buy it. And so we've all had that time where we've been talking about something, fuzzy pink bunny slippers, and you get on social media and there's like 7 ads from 7 different companies, including Sheen, to try to sell you some fuzzy pink bunny slippers, right? That's AI. That's corporate AI for business trying to get you on the hook to buy something. But this also does hyper-personalized advertising. So this processes demographic and behavioral data in real time to serve targeted ads that maximize click-through rates. It knows you were talking about fuzzy pink bunny slippers. It's going to make sure that it hits you with those 7 ads, like I said, from 7 different companies to see if you're interested in. And the whole point of that is to try its best. Like, advertising costs money. If somebody that's selling fuzzy pink bunny slippers wants to pay for advertising, it makes absolutely no sense for them to sell that to somebody who historically has never worn or bought slippers, never has that come up in conversation. It's never been something that they search for on the internet. All these data points know all this stuff about you, that you are a regular slipper wearer. You are somebody that's already been looking at some kind of new slippers. You, whatever, fit into a demographic that is somebody that is generally on the hook for buying slippers, et cetera, et cetera. But then this also gets into dynamic pricing algorithms. And I've talked briefly about dynamic pricing on a previous episode, but to shorten it as best as I can, dynamic pricing is that I will pay what I will pay for something while you pay what you will pay for that exact same thing. And there's all kind of different videos that you could watch online. There was one brought by a channel called More Perfect Union. More Perfect Union had this group of like 10 different people buy the exact same stuff from the exact same places and compare receipts at the end of it all, only to find out, what a shocker, nobody got it for the same price. Sentiment analysis. So scraping public social media posts, reviews, and customer service chats to evaluate how consumers feel about a brand. Again, fuzzy pink bunny slippers. If 4 of those 7 different companies are places that you have had no good positive interaction with, you've been vocal on different things to leave bad reviews, it's probably not going to give you anything from those 4. It's only going to show you the stuff from the 3 that you have some kind of favorable thing with. But then here's the one that is really kind of sketchy. Biometric tracking, utilizing facial recognition and gaze tracking in physical retail stores to see which shelves draw the most consumer attention. Have you seen the new price tags that have been in like Kroger and Walmart, the ones that are digital, the ones that they could just switch at a moment's notice without anything? There are different people, different places reporting and showing videos of how those getting rolled out in certain stores, certain places actually have little tiny cameras on them. And those little tiny cameras are watching what your reaction is to different things. And it knows that you're going to basically stand there and give some kind of a thought about this product. Like I said earlier, it knows that you go down the aisle and you pick up that bag of chips every single week without even batting an eye about it. You must have those chips. Well, under dynamic pricing rules, they're just going to make sure that those chips are a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more, and see if it's anything that you ever even paid attention to. Meanwhile, at the end of the aisle, that place that you stood at for 47 seconds sitting there pondering that box of Cheez-Its, maybe they're going to make it just a little bit less next time, and a little bit less and a little bit less, till they figure out when is the time that you don't stand and watch that end cap for 47 seconds. You just pick up a box of Cheez-Its and you throw it in your thing. If you can get on the other side of that and get it to a point where that's going to be an automatic thing in your cart, then they can start doing like they did with the bag of chips, and each week put it up a little bit and put it up a little bit and put it up a little bit and see if you ever even notice. But the idea of something being a static price across everybody that picks that item up in the store is slowly starting to go away. Dynamic pricing, please look into it for yourself. But we have on the other side of this AI for you and me. What do you use AI for? Write reports, come up with business emails, maybe help you, I don't know, generative productivity, writing emails, summarizing long documents, creating images, debugging code to save individual users time. Yes, I used AI to come up with some of the stuff that I'm talking about here on this show, talking about the dangers and the pitfalls of AI. Creative and entertainment engines, powering algorithmic feeds on video platforms and music apps to curate content specific to personal tastes. This is why you only see the stuff that you see in your Facebook. This is why you see only the stuff that you see in your Instagram or whatever it is that you're on. You definitely know by now about the algorithm. They claim it's what they think you want to watch. I think that there are people out there that make the argument that it's showing you stuff to keep you on a certain page and not feed other things that you might be about or page that you might be on. You may have virtual assistants, personalized agents serving as virtual assistants, scheduling tools and interactive tutors to streamline daily household or academic workflows, and automated accessibility, providing real-time language translation, live audio transcription, and computer vision descriptions for visually impaired users. Listen, all those tools are great, but if you really think about it, if you really drill down, all of those things that are made for us as the consumers are actually made to make us not think for ourselves, not be capable of critical thinking, which therefore makes you be a much more susceptible consumer. So I would make the argument that the AI tools for consumers are in a roundabout way still for business, right? So like what does this all eventually lead to, right? The thing that comes to mind, so I don't know about you, but I've watched a whole bunch of episodes of Black Mirror, and there are definitely episodes of Black Mirror that make me think about this idea of what a bleak technical future, and I don't mean bleak by in like, this stuff stops being innovative and they don't do anything, but I mean like, have you heard about like Chinese social credit systems? I'm sure you have. And I believe that this is something that this can all very easily lead to. And what's wild about it is that this has been rolled out and has been used in China for a while, but it won't be called that here, nor will it be rolled out by the government. Because if you haven't been paying attention to a lot of different other stuff that I've been talking about on here, I would argue that our government is not even really the ones that call the shots for everything that goes on in this country. Industry rules everything in this country. The government is like this false front to suggest that you have some kind of a choice or input in things. You don't. I've talked at great length about how all the different investment firms, because of how much power and clout they have in the portfolios of all the different things that they manage for their customers, and how with that gives them this tremendous amount of voting power in all these different companies already. So like even within that, you don't necessarily have competition and choice within companies within an industry, because at the end of the day, the same people that get to vote for all the different things on these quote unquote competitive products are the same people. And they can use and utilize that to their own benefit. But beyond that, you have all of these different lobbyists from every single industry that you can think of that constantly put pressure on people within positions of power in our nation's capital to make rules and laws and regulations that benefit them, not you, not me, them. Because at the end of the day, everybody's beholden to the investor. Everything's about return on investment. And that's the end all, be all of absolutely everything. But back to AI and data centers. This is going to function as social credit. It's just not going to come from that direction. This is instead going to come from the corporate direction. And what do I mean? Alternative credit data. It's surging. AI platforms no longer just look at your bank account. They analyze mobile phone usage patterns, rental payment histories, e-commerce transaction frequencies, and even social media behavior to generate risk scores for loans and housing. It ain't about your credit score no more. That is something that will maybe get you initially in the door of someplace, but for them to come up with like how they're going to structure a loan for you, or even if they're going to give a loan for you, that's now getting processed through all these different data points. In fact, I would make the argument that me putting together a video like this and a video series like this on YouTube for everybody to see, this is definitely collecting data on me to make sure that somehow, some way, this is labeling me as not a compliant citizen. And I don't think that we should be compliant citizens, because this stuff is just absolutely crazy. Insurance profiling. Insurance companies legally scrape public social media profiles and use algorithmic risk models to adjust premiums. If your data tracks you engaging in hobbies deemed unhealthy or high risk, you pay more. You remember Along Came Polly, Ruben Pfeffer, he was the risk assessment manager for the insurance company, and he had that Australian guy that liked to base jump off of buildings and everything else. And the guy that had like the film crew following him around, like doing his own true Hollywood story on himself because he was a child actor or whatever. Like that guy had to come in and like give this commanding speech at the end to make everybody pull for going ahead and giving this. That won't work anymore. That like getting the boardroom to go along with giving somebody approval on risk for an insurance policy, that ain't happening no more. This is all going through AI. Gig economy and marketplace managing platforms like Uber, Airbnb, and eBay use individual customer ratings. If your behavior drops your rating below a specific threshold, you are deplatformed. In a future where transportation and housing are increasingly digitized services, being banned by an algorithm effectively limits your mobility and shelter. Finally, algorithmic content moderation. Financial technology firms and payment processors have increasingly penalized users or shut down accounts based on online speech or political affiliations, effectively using financial access to police social norms. So while you have in China, you have this idea of the government authority being like the primary driver, on this side of things, in the Western side of credit score system, you're having corporate profit and risk mitigation be like, what is the determining factor of implementing anything like this? So again, China, their data sets was coming from like court registries, tax records, state surveillance, and civic infractions. You know, if you were jaywalking or you got a speeding ticket or whatever, that was what was being used by that. Now they're looking at your social media feed. Like over here in the West, they're looking at your social media feed, the app usage data, your open banking and transaction history. Over there, there'd be public blacklists and centralized bureaucratic enforcement dashboards. You would have pictures of people up on the billboard to show other people that this guy, you know, doesn't pay his bills or he jaywalks or whatever. Over here, you just get banned. You get banned off of platforms, or you're going to pay $5 a box of Cheez-Its at some point in time when you go to the store. Over there, banned from public transit, luxury hotels, university enrollment. Over here, you're just going to pay through the nose for absolutely everything, if that's even, if they even allow you to do everything. So listen, like one of the biggest challenges that I've had going through all this and thinking about this listen, I'm 19 episodes in. I think you have a good idea where I stand about different things. I am a follower of Christ. I am very adamant that I believe in Christ. I believe the Bible tells as best as it can who Christ is. At the end of the day, it is all about Christ. And one of the things that has been a struggle going through all this is how does this fit? How does this fit with my belief structure of that I belong to Christ and that Christ is my Savior? I don't know how this did not like immediately jump out at me, because I really did. I went around on this for quite a while. I actually sat here several times and tried to record this episode, and I could never get to the end, because one of the things that I don't want to do while giving these shows is to just come at you with like, and this, and this, and they're trying to get you this way, and there's this thing that's wrong, and that's it for me tonight. Peace. Like, you're on that side. Like, what do you mean peace, dude? You sat here and just told me how like everything is crazy, and like we should all be like Eeyore and be down and sad and wild. But the world is the world. The world is going to world. It's what it does. At the end of the day, we've talked about this several times. The love of money is the root of all evil. And what this essentially all comes down to is that this is just more ways for them to squeeze the last little bit out of you, because they don't care about you. They don't care about humanity. They don't care about civilization. They don't care about any of that stuff. They just care that the new 7 Series is out and it's got nicer leather than the 2026 7 Series. When an AI-driven social credit system bases your worth off of profitability, bases you off of your behavior, bases you off of risk assessment, Christ offers the exact opposite. He's not trying to make a profit off you, despite what you may find going into many churches in America. He knows what kind of behavior human beings have. That was the whole point of him becoming man. He knows the types of things that we deal with. Like, one of his people, like, literally sold him out. And then the guy that was like his closest literally denied him 3 times, just like he said he would, just before the rooster crowed to signify the next day. Like, the next day hadn't even come, and you're already denying me thrice, right? You have to perform in this world to get access. And despite what you may be told from the local pulpit, the performance that you give has no bearing, none, on where you stand with Christ. So you got conditional access versus unconditional grace, right? The algorithm tracks everything that you do, every misstep, every bad transaction, every low rating. It saves your digital history permanently to calculate whether you are worthy. Christ operates on justification and grace. Spiritually tracking you does not compile a list of past debts. Nothing to penalize you. Your slate is wiped clean. You are viewed as Christ. Algorithm reduces your human complexity to a data point, a risk profile. Classifies you by what you consume, how much you earn, how compliant you are with the systems. Christ defines your identity by your relationship to him. The algorithm leverages the fear of being locked out, canceled, or deplatformed to force compliance. It creates anxiety by making human survival dependent on digital approvals. Christ offers ultimate security. Biblical narrative consistently reminds believers that the systems of this world are temporary, fluctuating, and secondary to God's sovereignty. Faith teaches that even if earthly platforms exclude you, your ultimate provision and security remain intact. Who gauges you? Well, in the corporate data system, AI algorithms. In the kingdom of God, a loving and just God, a loving and just omniscient creator. And see, this is something that also goes along with all this. This is the last thing I'm going to say about this, and then I will part ways with you all. It is really the end game for technology to come up with the ability to know everything, be everywhere, all the time. That's the whole omniscience, omnipotence, omnipresence. Those are characteristics of God and God only. And what man is really trying to do is to come up with that exact same set of characteristics, but just through this. just through flock cameras and data tracking and thinking that it knows you. You know who knows you? God knows you better than any of these AI algorithms think that they know you. I hope that with the end of what I have to say here, I hope that this gives you genuine hope. I hope you know Christ. If you don't know Christ, I hope that you come to know Christ. And I'm not saying this like some weird pastor who's like, you could die tomorrow. And I'm not saying any of that at all. I think that turns far more people off from churchianity, which is a word that I will continue to use, than genuine faith and belief in Christ. Listen, that's all I got for you this evening. I really hope that you enjoy what I have to say. Please give me a like, a share, a subscribe, comment on the video. Even if you don't agree with what I have to say, comment on the video. I am definitely up for discussion. I love y'all. Peace.